It all began at Jusei High when Akemi Nakajima fused his knowledge of the dark arts and computers to create the Devil's Summoning program. But the demons he called broke free from their digital cage. After they found a way to manifest themselves in the real world, the demons set out to enslave humanity, but were thwarted by Akemi Nakajima and Yumiko Shirasaki. The both of them were incarnations of powerful gods. But the Dark Lord Lucifer has revived his fallen servants and sealed away the divine spirit of Izanami within his dark and twisted maze. If the two of them do not succeed, humanity will be doomed. Run, demon.
Welcome to Preemptive Strike, the show where we look at the first hour of a JRPG to gauge the entertainment value of its opening act and gather statistical data to analyze the trends across different games. Join us as we journey through the rich history of JRPGs to see how their gameplay evolves and innovates from one game to the next. For each game, we'll examine how the first hour sets the tone for the rest of the journey, explore the ways in which the story and gameplay unfold to draw the player into the world and keep them coming back, as well as explain general tips, tricks, and trivia for a first-time player. Today, we'll discuss all of this and more on Preemptive Strike.
Welcome to episode 9 of Preemptive Strike, the show where we talk about all things you need to know before starting up your retro RPG adventure. This week we'll be talking about Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei for the Famicom. So, Megami Tensei 1, released originally for the Famicom September 11th, 1987. I am not making that date up, that is the exact date. They could not predict the future. It also released on various computers that same year throughout July and September of 87. So it released on MSX, PC 8801, Mark II, and a bunch of other random computers I've never heard of. I could flash them on screen if you're curious about the other computer releases. Another release it had was the Super Famicom version of Kyu-Yaku. Geez, really butchered that pronunciation. Kyu-Yaku Megami Tensei, which is a bundle of 1 and 2 for the Super Famicom. That released March 31st, 1995. It also received ports on old Japanese mobile phones in 2004, and it received a Wii Virtual Console port back in the day. But this game has never released or been localized outside of Japan.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising given the modern popularity of Persona and the Megami Tensei franchise as well.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it, like Atlas did localize Shin Megami Tensei 1 on like the iOS store back in the day. And I'm assuming it just didn't sell that well that they don't even have the license renewed for still selling on the App Store today.
Mm.
As well as never porting the other games, unfortunately, to the West, or localizing the games.
And I know you'll touch upon this later, but it might also be that they never decided to bring it over to the West since it is based on a book that was also never brought to the West.
Yeah. I'm actually going to bring up the author later, too, because he's a pretty cool guy. You should follow him on Twitter. But, like, he's working on actually translating the book officially, or the trilogy. And he'll sometimes talk about it on Twitter.
Maybe bright things are in the future of Megami Tensei.
We will see. So, Megami Tensei was developed by Atlas and published by Namco For the Super Famicom release later, Atlas would have the full rights for it and just publish and develop it. But interestingly, how I mentioned those computer releases around the same time as the Famicom release, that was developed and published by Telenet Japan. As we'll get into a little bit later, the PC version and the Famicom version are completely different games, essentially. So, for notable staff members, we have the director being notable staff members for the Famicom version. We have Koji Okada being the director, Hisaki Minaru being the artist. We have Kazunari Suzuki and Aya Nishitani, who was the writer of the Digital Devil Story books. And then we have Tsukasa Masuko being the composer for the music. Sales-wise in Japan, we actually have like really accurate data from Sega itself, who owns Atlas. The Famicom version sold 141,808. I'm very surprised they have like it down to a single digit.
Yeah, that's almost uncanny. Like I'm a bit suspicious.
Yeah. The Super Famicom version sold 31,525, and Atlas goes out of its way just to ignore any of the sales for the PC version, like they just don't mention it at all. But Okada did mention that the PC version was a commercial success and it gave Atlas more of a financial breathing room to continue making games or continue the series.
Yeah, what would Atlas be without Megami Tensei?
Yeah, they probably would have just faded into obscurity or just stayed as a smaller company working under Capcom. Or not Capcom, Namco. So if you, as in the listener, are looking to play this game, you could expect about 23 to 30 hours roughly to play. So according to howlongtobeat.com, the main story is 23 and a half hours. Main plus sides, 27 and a half hours, and a completionist playthrough being about 32 hours.
Do you have any idea what differentiates a main story and completionist run?
Not really, to be honest, because from what I understand, there's not a whole lot of side content in the original.
Yeah, as to be expected for a Famicom release.
So when this game released, it was received pretty well overall. In Famitsu, it received a 31 out of 40, and it was giving praise for its unique gameplay and unusual setting. But at the same time, it was criticized by others. In 1991, Family Computer Magazine had an article where it criticized the game for being very easy to get lost in. But overall, as as this game's aged over time, other outlets have praised the game for having very good depth, like when it came to the fusion mechanics and difficulties, especially given the time that it came out and what games existed. And then for like, the Atlas games in general, or eventually we'll get the Shin Megami Tensei and other of the Megami Tensei games, Cerberus is a very important demon in the Digital Devil Story novels, and Cerberus act essentially as Atlas's early mascot character for a lot of these games. Like Cerberus is a recurring character in most of the Famicom and Super Famicom releases or games.
So, this is. So you're saying like Cerberus is the Jack Frost before Jack Frost came to be?
Yes, essentially. I think like Jack Frost starts getting more relevance like around SMT 1 and 2. And like I think that like the fans just like Jack Frost and like you just see Atlas kind of pushing him more.
That's interesting with Cerberus, especially because if I remember correctly, the sprite that they use for Cerberus only has one head. It doesn't seem like the Cerberus that is so prevalent in Western culture.
Correct. All right, on to the development history. So, Aya Nishitani wrote the Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei trilogy of books. They were published by Takuma Shoten. These books were very successful in Japan, and so Nishitani and Toku Shoten began adapting the books into multimedia series. They started with an OVA which covered the story of the first novel, and at the same time as while the OVA was in production, they started a video game tie-in. At first, they went to Nintendo and pitched their idea, but they got shot down because it would have been too mature for a Nintendo game. So they were desperate to get a video game, so they just started like putting out requests or sending out the license to a bunch of companies to see who would take them up on the idea. And they got a response back from two companies at the same time, being Atlas, who applied for the ownership or the license through Namco, and then Telenet Japan. Both of these, or Atlas and Telenet Japan, were both pretty small companies, so they were both willing to work together on the project as well as like just differentiate their releases that it made. So Atlas worked on the Famicom version and Telenet Japan worked on the PC version. For the rest of the development history, I'm going to just focus on the Famicom version since that's the one I played and that's the one that's remembered today, as well as what inspired the rest of the Megami Tensei series, as well as the Shin Megami Tensei, or just pretty much all Atlas games going forward.
I do want to say one thing before you move forward.
Yes.
Yeah, it is interesting that this game ended up landing on a Nintendo console because it is a little bit mature for Nintendo standards.
Yeah, the developers actually say that if they weren't working under Namco for this game, that it would not have released in or Nintendo at all. Like they already got shut down by Nintendo, but just the notoriety of Namco as well as the good working relationship that Nintendo and Namco had at that time compared to other third-party developers, it just really helped them actually get it to go through.
Yeah, I guess like Megami Tensei kind of did become the grim and dark RPG series, which there was a lack of in Nintendo's lineup, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely stands out in that regard. Anyway, so during development of the Famicom version, very early, the developers wanted to basically just make a carbon copy of Wizardry because they liked that series so much. But Kazunari Suzuki suggested that they needed to add other elements to stand out from Wizardry, and that's ultimately what resulted in the demon negotiation system, which is very iconic. I mean, it's pretty much relevant in every Atlas game to date now. So Aya Nishitani was very involved with the development of the story. He made suggestions on how to include the story elements as well as like how to be faithful to the story as a whole. But due to storage limits of Famicom cartridges, they had to cut a ton of story elements, so they just focused on the big like story portions. But one of the biggest cuts of story that they removed was the questionable morality of Nakajima. This was like a heavy theme that was explored throughout the novels, but it just didn't make its way into the Famicom release.
Is there a divide between fans of the novel and fans of the game? Are there like two different camps of fandoms? I'd imagine you have to research on like 1980s, or not 80s, but the early 90s Japanese forums, which could be kind of hard.
Right. I mean, at least from a Western perspective, there's very few like hardcore Atlas fans that have even touched any of like the Famicom games or even Super Famicom games.
Right.
And then there's going to be even less of them that have went through to read the books.
All right, let me rephrase this. In your opinion, do you think there could be people do you think there could be a divide between people who are fans of the novel and people who are fans of the game?
I think it'd be very insignificant. Like I'm trying to like compare it to like whenever a popular book gets a movie, and
Yeah.
then all the people that read the book first are like, "Oh, the book's so much better because it didn't cover this or it changed this."
Yeah.
So I feel like there's always going to be like those few elitist. So since this game was never released in the West or localized, I had to use a translation patch. Some of the people who worked on the translation patch are Esper Knight, Pennywise, Tom, Ryusui, Sin underscore Batsu, and DVD. I believe I've seen a lot of these names like on other translation patches in the past, but I was struggling to find a lot of information on like the history of the translation patch, and most of the stuff that came up was basically people saying to just play the Super Famicom version instead because it just has a better patch. Moving on to the manual, I was very surprised to see that someone actually went out of their way to translate the manual and like make it Americanized almost. But reading through that, the manual didn't stand out too much. Like it's exactly what you'd expect from other manuals at this point. It does give you a lot of story background because like the game itself only gives you like a few sentences on like the opening title screen if you let it play for context, since the game itself assumes that you watch the OVA and kind of have like some information of like the first novel.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting thinking of that. I didn't bring this up earlier, but like, how many games were there based off of books back then? This had to have been like one of the first.
Yeah, I mean, I think of there's probably more movie video games than there are book video games.
That's true. That's true. Although you could stretch the definition of books like comic books or manga as well. But
True.
where do you draw the line? I'm thinking of Digital Devil Story as a novel.
Yes. Okay, so moving on to the gameplay and game mechanics. This is going to be the most unique game we've covered so far. There's a lot of mechanics that you just don't see in other RPGs even to this day.
Well, okay, I have a question now that you bring that up. Is it was it their goal to stand out from Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy? Like was there discussion in the development about that?
No, they were like shoehorned or focused on wizardry because like I was saying, like they really just wanted to make a carbon copy of wizardry at first.
That's interesting because in Phantasy Star they were really hardcore trying to be different from Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. Like that was their goal. But they were inspired by first-person dungeon crawlers in the West.
Yeah, yeah. I'll have to do some more research after we finish this discussion to see if like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy shows up at all. Because to my knowledge, no. So anyway, the biggest thing that like a lot of Atlas games are known for are demon negotiation, which I've kind of mentioned before. So in battles, you can actually have the option to talk to your enemies, and if you pick the correct options, you can recruit them to your party. You can hold up to 7 demons in total at a time, like in your menu, and you could have 3 demons summoned at once. So including Nakajima and Yukimo, you could have 5 party members fighting at the same time. But you can't just summon these demons freely. To initially summon them into your party, you need to pay money or maka, which is known as in the game. And then as you walk by or walk in the dungeon or just anywhere, you will deplete your magnetite, which is another type of money essentially. And the stronger the demon is that you currently have summoned, the faster the magnetite will drain. But in this game, when your magnetite hits 0, the demons you have summoned just lose HP as you walk around. In future Atlas games that use magnetite still, your demon will actually get unsummoned if you run out of magnetite. And interestingly, these enemies don't actually, or the demons you recruit don't level up. They just stay the same level, stats, abilities, or spells whenever you recruit them. And this ties into the other feature with demons being fusion. I didn't get to try out fusion at all in my first hour of gameplay, but essentially, since you can fuse your demons and your demons don't level up in these games, they're really incentivizing the player to experiment with fusions to keep shuffling around their party, keep it fresh as they play. Like, don't be playing this game like with a Pokemon sentimentality where you're gonna keep the same monster on your team the entire playthrough. Like you will lose.
All right, I got a few things to say from what you've said. First off,
Yes.
5 party members? That's unheard of in a game this like in this era. 5 party members? Wow. Simultaneously. Plus you get to switch out party members with the other demons that you can get. Pretty cool. It sounds pretty challenging to balance 2 different currencies as well as, well, maybe not 2 different currencies, but a currency and a resource, we'll call it, the magnetite.
Kinda, I thought the same. Like, I thought it'd be kind of intimidating, but it really didn't seem that bad early game. Like, enemies were dropping a lot of money pretty fast,
Hmm.
and magnetite, although they're not guaranteed to drop magnetite. I don't know if it's like a chance or if it's just like certain enemies are more inclined to drop magnetite.
Yeah, and then as far as the Maka goes, how much stuff is there to buy? How big of a gap is there between the amount of Maka enemies drop and the amount of Maka it costs to buy something in a store?
So when you start the game, like you start in the town, Mycon town, I think it's called. Oh, Mycon, Mikon town.
Okay.
It's at the top of Daedalus Tower, which is where you start the game. So anyway, you explore that town a little before you go into the dungeon. Like there's a chest right next to the armor and weapon shop that gives you 500 gold,
Maka.
and that's enough to get. Oh yeah, Maka.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. It's always hard to, or you just want to say gold like consistently because I feel like it's the most common.
I mean, I don't know what sprite they used for Maka in the game, but they probably used some kind of gold coin, if any.
I don't even think there is a sprite.
Okay.
But anyway, that's enough Maka to get you like a weak piece of equipment for both your characters and weapon. But like the most expensive weapon I think was 800 Maka, or maybe it was the most expensive armor, but like it's not that much. But the thing that gets you is healing cost. So like you're pretty weak early game fighting these demons, so like most of your money's going towards healing until you get a little bit stronger, recruit another demon to help you kill enemies faster and more frequently before needing to heal. And then if you die too, the revival cost is pretty high.
Hmm. Okay.
So if Nakajima and Yukimo or Yumiko both die in battle, you get a game over. I got one game over while I was playing. It was about 20 minutes in, and I was very scared because the Famicom version uses a password system. So I just assumed that like all my progress was going to be lost. But to my surprise, if you keep the game like left on, like after you get a game over, like you get a continue option, and you respawn with your current level and like all your equipment and all that and your demons. You just lose half your gold and all of your gems, which are essentially just a healing item. But gems are also useful for demon negotiating to help recruit demons.
So there's another currency?
Yes, that's kinda.
Resource, we'll just use the general term resource. Another resource? Jeez.
Yeah. But like I was confused like not getting any items really, like because you don't get that many gems like throughout playing normally. So I was just confused. Like every time I go in the menu, I'm like, is there really not going to be an items option? Like there's a in battle, there's like a gem option you could use if you have gems. Speaking of battles, you when you first start a battle, there's 4 commands. You have fight, run, change order, or auto. Change order is you just so like Nakajima's your first slot, Yumiko's your second slot, at least when you start, and then your demons would be like slots 3, 4, and 5. You can switch the order of which they are, and I believe it's like other RPGs like Dragon Quest where the higher slot you are, the more likely you are to get hit. So you're like weaker, more fragile allies you want to put towards the bottom of your list. The fight command, if you use that, you could pick from attack, using magic if your character has magic, and then defend. And then auto will speed up the battle. It doesn't display any text like, oh, you did like 6 damage with this attack to this enemy. And it just selects for all the characters the previous action you did. If you start the battle and just immediately hit auto, all of your characters will just do a regular attack. Speaking of battles in the enemies spawn a group, so like you'll only see one sprite of an enemy, but it'll be actually a group of like 3 of them sometimes, or like even more. Like towards the end of my hour, I fought 5 will-o-wisp all at once. And interestingly, because of this group battle system, some weapons that you hold or equip can actually attack multiple times or like attack multiple enemies. But I don't know, I kind of wish I could see all of the enemies instead of just one. Or like I kind of wish like there was like multiple sprites like overlaid on top of each other, or like just offset to see. But
Question. So, are there battle backgrounds? Like, do you see the area that you're in whenever you get into a battle, or is it like transport you to a magical black background?
it's just like wherever you're like in the dungeon currently, like
All right.
because you're in first person,
Yeah.
so it, like kind of just pops up.
Yeah. All right. I want to say, Fantasy Star does something very similar to that, and it is probably for graphical limitations that they have to only show one at a time. Because you think of Dragon Warrior 2, where there were multiple enemies, or any of the Dragon Warriors on the NES/Famicom. If they had multiple enemies, then there was a black background, or just they always had a black background because there was always the possibility for there to be multiple enemies.
Yeah,
So I'm pretty sure that's just a graphical limitation to only show one at a time. I get the disappointment though; it is pretty lackluster to be fighting 5 will-o-wisps and you only see one.
yeah. But it's also like misleading. Like if you're not paying attention or whatever, you might just think, "Oh, there's one enemy there. I could just kind of handle it real quick." But then, oh, you guys got hit 5 times and half your party's like almost dead.
Yeah.
So moving on, there's I could go into the moon cycle next, which is another unique mechanic for this game. Although it doesn't have a whole lot of functionality in the original. Like they had ideas for it, but just wasn't super implemented at the time. So the moon cycle you'll see is the top, it'll be like in the top left corner of your screen. The moon cycles from in eighth cycles, so it goes from new moon, which would be 0 out of 8, and it goes all the way to a full moon, which is 8 out of 8. And all it really does is affect how enemies act. So in a full moon, basically don't talk to enemies because they'll just act crazy. And there's a few points in the like later in the game where you need to cast the spell for like story reasons, but you could only cast the spell in like a certain moon phase. But other than that, there's really not much reason to care about the moon cycle. Interestingly, there's a spell called Mappa, which displays a map for you as you walk, which is a godsend. You don't need to actually use graph paper while you're playing. But once you get to New Moon, it like the spell like runs out of duration and you need to recast it. But if you're still in New Moon, you have to walk around until you hit 1/8 before you can cast it again. Like the spell will just keep failing to cast, which it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure it out while I was playing it. So I apologize if it's frustrating to watch and you see me like use it like several times.
Well, you can't. They couldn't have expected you to know that unless there was some NPC that would tell you that right at the beginning.
Nope.
Maybe it's in the instruction manual, but you said you found the translation for the instruction manual, and I'm guessing it wasn't in there.
Yeah, I don't. There really wasn't much on the moon cycle at all in the instruction manual.
Yeah, okay.
So the only other thing I want to mention about gameplay is the stats. There are 5 stats, and you get to actually allocate skill points every time you level up into like a certain stat. So you could customize your characters that way. You start out at 5 in each of those stats, and when you start the game, you get 15 stat points to allocate to customize your characters. So the first stat is strength or STR. It's what later Megami or Shin Megami Tensei games would label as vitality. All it does is affects your HP. I wish I realized that wasn't like actually your attack because I put a lot of points into the strength and then was wondering why my attacks were still doing the same amount of damage. Next stat is wisdom or WIS, and that's just like the vitality, but instead of your HP, it affects your MP. Next, you have attack or ATT, which is just affects your strength power or attack power. And then you have agility, which is AGI, which affects your the percent of you actually landing a hit. how fast you act at the start of a turn, and your evasion chance. And then lastly, there's luck, which just affects critical hits.
So there's nothing for defense?
No, the only thing that affects your defense is the equipment that you have.
Interesting.
All right, now, so before I get into my hour of gameplay, I just want to go over my personal history of this game, and that's nothing.
You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
I've never played the Megami Tensei games, but I have played a ton of Atlas games growing up. Played a lot of Atlas games on PS2 specifically back in the day, like Persona 3 FES, Persona 4, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. So Atlas really formed a lot of my love for RPG or JRPGs over the years growing up. And the only thing I really knew about Megami Tensei before playing this is, or at least for the Megami Tensei like fandom, it's a pretty popular YouTuber, Marsh. I've seen some of his videos on it where he covered, I believe, the Kyu version.
Yep.
But other than that, like, this is pretty much going into this blind. So it was pretty interesting overall just to see how much of, like, just Atlas gameplay was set in stone, like, with this game.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
For sure. So before getting to the gameplay a little bit, just go over a little bit of the story that the game tells you, as well as what you would know if you watched the OVA / looked the manual a little bit. So Nakajima, the main character, the guy, he's a computer programmer, and he invents the demon summoning program. Stuff goes bad with it though, and then demons come out of the computer and enslave humanity. And so Nakajima and Yumiko, the girl in the party, defeat the demons, and it turns out that they were both incarnations of powerful gods. That's exactly the wording that at least the fan translation uses on the title screen. So the story of Megami Tensei, the game itself, is Lucifer is mad after this, and he revives the demons that Nakajima and Yumiko killed. And Lucifer also seals the divine spirit of Izanami, who's a very prominent god in Japanese mythology. And so humanity will be doomed if Izanami is not freed. So your goal of the game is to defeat Lucifer and free Izanami. And after that, that's the only story you get. You just see a slight cutscene, like on the title screen, where Nakajima and Yumiko walk into this pyramid, it appears. And that's Daedalus Tower, actually. And you start at Micon Town, which is at the top of the tower. And the only other story I've really got throughout playing in the first hours, there was an NPC that mentioned at the bottom of the tower is Minotaur.
So what causes the tower to rise up? Like, where does it come from?
You're asking good questions, but I don't have answers to that. It's weird because it's like in the shape of a pyramid, but it's called a tower too.
Well, could be a translational thing, not 100% sure. One thing I've always liked about the Atlas games in general, and they even do it here in the very first one, is the inclusion of Christianity into other types of mythologies. Because I feel like a lot of video games, you have your Greek mythologies, your Norse mythologies, your Japanese mythologies, but you never really see Christianity brought up. And that is definitely one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, like the most prominent reason this game was not brought to the West, in at least back in the NES days.
Yes. Well, I also just appreciate that like they take so many cultures together, different religions, and just mix them all together. Just I always like it, learn about different religions or cultures, or especially through future games where you could actually like read the descriptions of the demons and like where they came from and like their original stories.
Yeah, the compendium. It is interesting how they always seem to put Christianity on top, though. Like, the final boss is always some version of either Christian or Jewish, the Abrahamic view of God and the devil, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if maybe just because like Christianity's not as prominent in Japan, so like it's seen as more interesting to the developers there.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, it's in the same way that Greek mythology is interesting to us, or Japanese Shintoism, some other kinds of things that are part of a culture's history, but not its present.
Yeah. So moving away from the religious talk,
Yeah.
I am so glad that they had the Mappa spell in that game or in the game. So you could pressing the B button, you could cycle your screen a little bit. It would shift to the left or the right. If it shifted to the right, it would be your menu commands. Like you could go into your view the status of your allies, and then if you shifted to the right, you could actually see the map while the Mappa spell was active. And frankly, I think it's necessary just to play the game. Like the directionality of where you're moving just gets jumbled up all the time unless you could see like your positioning on the map and like how you rotate as you press certain directions on the D-pad. It just gets very complicated really fast, especially like when you go into doors or like rooms with NPCs and stuff like that. Like it doesn't make sense a lot of times. One thing that stood out to me is the Medi spell being the healing spell. For whatever reason, it heals all of your party members like a lot, but the character that casts is Yumiko. It heals her for like 1 to 2 HP instead, where everyone else is getting healed for like 30 to 40. And like I couldn't find much information like why it functions that way, but it was just annoying. So like she just the reason I would have to go back to town often to heal was actually because she would be out of MP or she'd just be low at HP, and I just couldn't heal her up consistently without wasting all my MP.
Do you have any headcanon explanation?
I'm thinking of it like so in like Fire Emblem games or like there's other RPGs out there where like your white mage or like the characters that could heal can't heal themselves, but they could heal other characters.
Yeah.
So like, I wonder if it's just whatever the logic is behind that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd say the demon discussions were pretty rough back then. I mean, part of it too could just be that since I was using a fan translation, that like it just didn't it made less sense too to me. But like it it was never logical by like what answer I gave the demon if it would just run away from me, if it would attack me, or if it would join me. And like frankly, demon recruiting was very difficult to the point that I just gave up on it a lot of times. And so I only ended up having 2 demons recruited in my first hour. I had a gnome I got very early. And then I think I got really lucky with like a rare enemy spawning. It was a dryad or like a tree. Like I think it was a rare spawn, and I've only ever saw one, and like it probably would have killed me if I didn't recruit it. So like I was pretty hyped to get it to join my party, and like he hit like a truck. There was an NPC that mentioned that, or there's NPCs scattered out. Like they give you a lot of good hints and like explanations for gameplay mechanics overall. Like NPCs explain that demons are more likely to join you if you have only one of them left on the battlefield. And then there was another one saying that only certain classes of demons can actually be recruited. I believe they said only 4. So like some demons I would talk to, like a ghost for instance, or like a zombie, and like they would just run away from me immediately. So I'm assuming those were some of the classes that couldn't be recruited. But like that was a good strategy because like the ghost for instance is like very strong. Like he would 2-shot a lot of my characters, so I could just talk to it and like have it run away from me instead of like taking a slight chance to run away from it instead.
I guess it would make sense that you can't recruit a ghost or a zombie. They're pretty much not intelligent enough. I don't want to be rude to any ghosts or zombies out there listening to this podcast, but I feel like they're kind of they're just they don't have like sentience. I mean, I don't know. I guess they are sentient. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Well, I think what you're trying to get at is like they lack the not intelligence, but the almost mental fortitude to like discuss with you of like how to actually join the party
Yeah.
or like negotiate with you.
Yeah, at least in like the classical depiction of a zombie, at least. I mean, sometimes even ghosts could be pretty smart, pretty malicious.
Yeah. But like who knows? At the same time too, I could have maybe just got very unlucky the times I did try talking to them. And like they just happened to run away each time.
Yeah. You gotta write the game facts guide to explain this since nobody else has.
There is one game facts guide in English, and that's it.
Yeah, okay.
And even that guide basically tells you should play the Super Famicom version. But it was interesting. I gotta give props to that game facts writer. They were translating stuff before the fan translation came out.
Oh,
Or like they wrote the guide before it came out.
nice.
So anyway, another thing that sucked too with like demon negotiation. So the NPC that tells you, oh, you should only, or it's much better if there's only one demon left to recruit. When you recruit, or even if you fail the recruitment, like the demon runs away or something, you don't get any experience for that entire battle. So you could have killed like 4 other enemies, like, and just get nothing for it because the last guy decides to run away.
That's just like illogical.
Yeah,
Like, what is experience if it's not just experience?
yeah, even if you are successful recruiting, you still don't get any experience. Like, so that's why I stopped trying to recruit demons a lot of times because like I needed the experience to get stronger overall and to keep the money in the magnetite so I could keep the other demons like in my party. Oh yeah, another thing too, encounters I don't think are actually random. Like I think encounters can only happen on certain tiles.
What leads you to that conclusion?
So every time I'd go through like a door, it was almost guaranteed to have an encounter, like or certain doors. And like it didn't matter, like no matter how much I would like walk back and forth, like I would have to like go onto that specific tile to actually do it. And I did kind of test this for like grinding. And like it seemed pretty consistent. Like I would be able to actually get enemies there, but then like on other floors I would just walk around like pretty much the entire floor and get like no encounters.
Yeah, that's pretty weird.
It's pretty weird, but I get since you're going up and down like all these floors, it could be it could be part of your strategy and like the path you take back to go to the steps to avoid more encounters.
Yeah, it could be a very calculated approach.
So yeah, get your graph paper. Actually, yeah, get your graph paper out and then mark an X for all the enemy spawn locations.
That means the game is like so predictable then. I I feel like this would be a speedrunner's dream.
I don't know. I feel like it's just so RNG for like trying to recruit demons that like it would very much screw them over. Although I'd be curious to see how much damage I would do if I put all my stats into like the attack stat early game. Because the stat points, I don't think I mentioned, they max out at 20. And you start at 5 in each stat, and you get those 15 stats to put at the beginning of the game. So you could theoretically just max out the attack stat immediately. My guess, though, is that it's more dependent on the weapon you're equipping, like how much damage you're really doing. Okay, so that about wraps up everything that I wanted to mention about the gameplay.
Well, I have a few more questions for you, Tyler, and you know exactly what they are.
Perhaps I do.
They're the gameplay stats. They're the gameplay stats. So, how many dungeons and how many towns did you visit during your first hour?
Just one for both towns and dungeons. I visited Mycon City, or town, which is just right where you start. It's the 8th floor of the tower, and the tower itself is Daedalus Tower.
All right, all right. And throughout your adventures through the towns and the dungeon, or the single town and the single dungeon, how many enemies did you encounter, and at what time did you get your first encounter compared to your first level up?
Okay, so I encountered a total of 45 encounters, which is 0.75 per minute. Although the encounter rate, like I'm saying, or how I theorize that it's not really a random encounter, it's more of just like I forced that number to be what it was since I was grinding
Yeah.
and like kept going over those specific tiles. But my first encounter was at 5 minutes 39 seconds, and I didn't level up for the first time until 16 minutes 55 seconds. So about 11 minutes, like 11 and a half minutes in between my first encounter and first level up. It could have been faster, but like I said, a lot of like I was trying to recruit demons very early, so a lot of my early encounters just gave me 0 experience.
Yeah, yeah, that does kind of put a dampener on the speed at which you level up. That feels kind of discouraging if it, like, yeah, more than 10 minutes to level up just once. Yeah.
But like after I got the first level up, like levels are just rolling in. Like I finished the game at level 5.
Okay. Yeah, so that brings up the last of the questions. After all of those battles, how many times did you die through all of them? How many times did you have to visit an inn? And what level did you finish the game at, which you already said?
Yeah, so I visited in a total of 5 times and I died once. Interestingly, and this is something you'll really appreciate. So after I did my hour, I continued playing a little bit just to go back to town and just get my password for the save file if I want to continue.
Yeah.
And Yumiko died on my like walk back up, but I got to level 6, like killing a few enemies later, and I was surprised to see that she leveled up. She kept getting experience even though she was dead.
Wow. Wow. Really breaking the boundaries of the other world just to get experience.
Yeah, but like it's really nice not seeing them like separated in levels.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Now I have one question actually. Now that I asked you about how many inns you visited, what kind of inn is there in Daedalus Tower?
It's not an inn. You like go to a person and like almost like a shaman of some sort, and like you select individually what party members you want to heal. So a lot of times the only one I healed was actually Yumiko because she had the heal spell,
Yeah, right.
and then I would just it was because why spend the gold or the Maka killing the other characters that don't even have MP? They just have HP.
Yeah, right. Right. Save it up.
Yeah, but there's a different room you go to if your character dies and you need to revive them.
Hmm.
So like you can't just go to the heal room. Like it's like the House of Healing or the clinic and like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest respectively.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Same old RPG mechanics.
Yep.
And after you finish your first hour, do you think you'd spend $1 to do it all again?
I think it was worth $1 just for the like historic value of seeing like where Atlas games like really started, or like the Shin Megami Tensei and Megami Tensei, like all of those sub series.
Yeah.
Would I continue playing it is a different question because from what I read, everyone pretty much says I should be playing the Super Famicom version or Kyoyaku version, especially because if you beat one, you get bonuses for 2, like whenever you start that on the Super Fam or the Kyoyaku version.
Mm-hmm.
So it just sounds like that integration I would appreciate too.
Well, we'll have to try it out sometime later.
Alrighty, so I believe that covers everything we wanted to discuss today for Digital Devil's story, Megami Tensei. Next time, we will be covering the sequel, actually, of Digital Devil's story, Megami Tensei 2, also for the Famicom.
So cool. All right. See you guys later.
Thank you for watching today and sticking to the end. We hope we gave an accurate representation of the first hour of gameplay, and more importantly, we hope we inspired you to check out the game and give it a chance. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more JRPG content from us. We have a lot of projects in production, so keep an eye out. Let us know what games and series you'd like us to cover in the future. Follow us on Twitter at encounter_rate. If you want to listen to our content in a podcast format, check us out at the places listed on screen. Links will be in description. We plan to upload to additional podcast sites in the future, and if you have any preferred podcast sites you wish we were on, let us know in the comments. Thank you again for watching. Until next time, have a great day.